Yes, can you hear me?
Wow. All right, mate. It's me, Russell Brand. How's it going?
I'm good, mate. Can you see me?
I can see you. I can hear you. You look like you're in the foyer of a hotel or something.
Well, it's a little private room. It's not a foyer. It's kind of like a private room. But John, it's in Liverpool. So you know what private rooms are like in Liverpool? Because we're salt of the earth, your kind of people, down to earth. Everybody's just all mixed in. So this is the VIP section. There are people just around.
Get them people out of there. Get them people out there.
They're out. The riffraff. Get the riffraff out. I can't believe you're wearing that shirt.
John, well, there's a time when you should have been wearing it. That's the truth of the matter.
Well, when I was leaving Liverpool and Harry gave me a little ring and Harry said, would you fancy come on down? Unfortunately, Kenny phoned me as well and Newcastle were in the Champions League. So I made the wrong decision, didn't I? I should have gone with Harry.
You should have come down, should have come to the East End. John, thanks for coming on. I also do this show with my friend Gareth, who loves you. And
hi, John. Lovely to meet you.
Hi, mate. How you doing?
Really well, really well.
Can you go a bit louder? I can hear you, but it's a bit.
Who, me or Gareth?
Well, you. I mean, I like Gareth, but I'd rather hear you. No offense.
Fair enough.
Well, I am speaking quite loudly, John, and I'm well on the mic. Can you hear me now, mate?
Oh yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
All right. So, John, thanks for coming on. I checked out your book, The Uncomfortable Truth About Racism, and on reading it, I felt that we should also do my other podcast, Under the Skin, which is a longer podcast. Which
someone mentioned that. Yeah, because that'd be better. Because of course, the book is also about capitalism and classism and elitism and stuff like that, and we can't really talk about that in 2 or 3 minutes, can we?
Well, you might be able to, John. It seems that
no, I'm not. I need a long time to talk about elitism and elites and non-elites and discrimination. Generally speaking.
Please don't take this the wrong way, because I don't mean I was surprised by the level of complexity of the arguments that you make in this book, because I suppose the subject of race is often a reductive one. Racism itself is a reductive attitude, but many of the proposed solutions to racism are similarly reductive. Me and Gareth just read a quote from your book just now, which talked about the intersectionality of race and class
and gender.
And gender and sexuality, and the many sort of tokenistic responses that are suggested as solutions to racial inequality that can never be anything more than gestures unless you address these co-committant issues as well.
Absolutely. So what you'll do is elevate a few more elite gay people, women, black people into the positions of power, thinking that things will change for the masses, and it won't, because it never happened in history from any revolution. I'm reading this book here, The Haitian Revolution. In fact, I've already read it.
Yeah.
They're rethinking the Haitian Revolution, because they're trying to make out that was about black slaves freeing themselves. It wasn't. It was about a middle class, black free mulatto trying to get more power from France in the name of the black slaves. And this is what it always has been. And that's why the book is really about not putting black footballers above the black community and thinking that we're doing anything because now we're going to stop racism towards them when nothing changes for the masses. It's to do it from the bottom up. Change the perception of the average black person, the average woman, and then things will get better further up the line. But that's a deep discussion.
It's deep, but it's a beautiful and it's a necessary discussion. And of course, it's relevant to the subject of class, which is perhaps a more clear marker of inequality, or certainly were the issues of class and economic inequality to be addressed.
And if we want an example of that, just look at the white working classes who are disenfranchised by the white elite. So why do we as black people think that the white elite are going to do us any favors when they're even discriminated against their own white working classes?
John, I suppose you could say historically that most empires colonized and tyrannized their indigenous population before embarking on imperialist projects abroad, before going out to Africa or elsewhere. Yeah. So John, it sounds like from the bits I've read of your book, mate, I picked it up just out of respect, you know what I mean, like you do when you're having a guest. But then I got into it because I was surprised, and I was surprised by the complexity of your arguments, your willingness to make unpopular ideas palatable. But I suppose I shouldn't have been surprised, because even in your career as a pundit and a contributor post your playing career, you've gotten involved in this subject in ways that are surprising.
Well, that's not the narrative that the establishment want to hear. That is why they're very uncomfortable. That's why I'm very happy for them to get me on Skype. If you want to talk about football tactics, put me on Strictly Come Dancing. But if you want to talk about inequality and race, then I don't compromise. And of course, they don't want to do that. They want to say that it's just Eastern European football fans or white working class football fans is the reason why black kids are stabbing each other on the street and black people can't get jobs, education, housing, and we're just neglecting. Not only are we neglecting them, we're deflecting from the real issues here systemically by saying, and of course, yes, we do have to point the finger at overt racists in Eastern Europe or white racist football fans, but they're not the reason why black people are disenfranchised, or the rapist isn't the reason that women are there's sexism towards women. You know, Martin Luther King said in 1963 that it is the shallow understanding of good people, which is a bigger problem than the total misunderstanding of bad people. And we just think, because I wouldn't racially abuse somebody or throw a banana on the field, I'm not racist. I wouldn't rape a woman, so I'm not sexist. I wouldn't beat up a gay guy, so I'm not homophobic. We're all somewhere along the line. And until we accept it within ourselves, we can't move forward.
I liked your willingness to approach it that openly. I thought it was a necessary contribution to the conversation. I was interested in how your own background as growing up in Jamaica, or at least spending part of your childhood there as a member of a military family, gave you a unique, or at least atypical, insight into the often simplified relationships between different class and racial groups. So even though I say it sounds like you have an extremely sophisticated view of race.
Well, interestingly, my father went to Sandhurst with Andrew Parker Bowles, who was Kimberly's first husband. He was the best man at my father's wedding. So as much as I brought up in a military background, don't forget there are two sides to a soul. My mother's family, the Hills of Jamaica, they were instrumental, her father and her uncle, alongside Alexander Bustamante and Norman Manley, Michael Manley's father, in starting the first Jamaican government. They were put in prison for sedition, for independence. So they were socialists. So from a political point of view, yes, I was brought up in a military and an elite military background, because my father was a colonel in the army. And when we came to England, we lived in Highgate, we lived in Mayfair, and, you know, we drove around with private plates because we had diplomatic immunity. But in terms of the way I always felt, it was completely different. Now, I remember playing football as an 18-year-old, and while I was getting racially abused as an 18-year-old, I was fine because I'm on the pitch, I'm on the coach, drinking champagne and having a nice, you know, fillet steak on the way home while fans outside were shouting at me or abusing me on the pitch, which was water off a duck's back. But I looked into the stand and I saw average black people getting beaten up, getting abused, and no one speaks for them. And we're still doing it now. The fans that are abused, if you want to put a football context, the fans that are abused and no one talks to them, we talk about an Eastern European on Twitter or someone on Twitter racially abusing a footballer, but so many black people who are football fans are in the stands getting abused. But as long as you don't do it to footballers, everything will be forgotten about. So really, I think that's the essence of the book, to do it from the bottom up.
I think when it comes to change, whether it's political, economical, or about addressing prejudicial attitudes, if it isn't done from the bottom up, it is almost by definition about symbols and gesture as opposed to authentic change.
Absolutely.
Mate, would you mind? One of the bits I enjoyed was your story about Graham Taylor. Are you checking your time? Are you under pressure?
No, I'm fine. Are we on? Are we on at 11, aren't we? I'm not, no, I don't have to leave till 11:30. I've got lots of time.
Cool. Thanks, man. Like that story you told about Graham Taylor when at Watford you was playing Oldham. Would you tell that story, mate?
Well, you know, I only found that out about 3 months ago from Luther. I was doing a podcast, I was doing an interview with Luther, and I'm talking to Luther about this. And I remember this was 1983, when, of course, it was virtually incumbent on you to racially abuse people back in 1983 if you're a football fan. Obviously, I'm being facetious, but that's the way it was. That's the way it was. And I wasn't aware of it. What had happened was, at halftime, we're playing against Oldham. At halftime, the team came back into the dressing room, and Graham wasn't there. Now, Graham was always the first in the dressing room, giving the team talk for the full 15 minutes. Everyone sat down and kept quiet. Graham wasn't there. And Sam Ellis, I think, was the coach. He started doing the team talk. And, you know, we just thought, well, this is a bit strange, but I don't know. We're not even thinking about where Graham was. He came in with about 3 minutes before we went out. So for about 12 minutes, Sam Ellis took the team talk. Graham came in, did a little bit, come on, lads, right, we're going to do blah, blah, blah. Went back out, played. Didn't know what had happened. What had then happened, as Luther told me, but Luther knew, he didn't know at the time, he found out after, and I only found out, as I said, 3 months ago, was that there were some Watford fans, and it's not because they're Watford fans. I'm always loath to talk about race when there's racism with football fans, because those fans say, you're saying we're racist at them. No. No more than the next one. But it was Watford, and some Watford fans were racially abusing one of the black players at Oldham. And we hardly heard it. In fact, if we heard it, we were used to hearing it anyway, so it wouldn't have registered with us. But obviously, Graham had heard it. And what he did was, at halftime when we went in, he went up to the PA system, got a microphone, went to the middle of the pitch, 1983, middle of the pitch, and he said, if I hear any more racist abuse to any of the Oldham fans, you've got 2 black players playing with you, And regardless of whether you have black players with you or wrong or not, you know it's wrong. If I hear it anymore, you will never come to this football stadium again, on the mic in front of everyone. And then he just gave the mic back, and that's how strong he was in terms of, now listen, that's a powerful moment, which was not even reported upon. You know, imagine if that happened now, and that's 1983, which shows you the greatness of Graham Taylor.
Yeah, it does. And I would like to add to that. How did you feel, mate, when subsequently he, as England manager, became the subject of a level of derision and ridicule that up until that point I'd never seen in media, and perhaps was the beginning of that level of media concerted condemnation, storm manufacture, you know, the turnip stuff on the front of the paper, all of that. How did you feel knowing that this was a person you knew personally, that had that kind of moral caliber to stand up in front of people when it wasn't fashionable, when it wasn't a gesture because of his own sort of spirit? How did that feel to see that happen?
It was hurtful, just even on a personal level, because this is a man I admired. But Graham was a little bit naive in that, because I remember when I was playing for England before he was managing England. So I'm playing for England, playing for Watford. And when I played for England, the press would give me a hard time. And he would say to me, and when I played for Watford, they would love me. And he pulled me aside and he said, you know what? Do you trust what the press say about you? I said, what do you mean? He goes, because you know when you play for Watford and they tell you you're the best in the world and how great you are, do you believe them? And if you believe them when they tell you that, when you play for England, believe them when they tell you you're rubbish. So don't worry about what the press say. Yeah. But what Graham didn't understand was that the press loved Watford because we were the underdogs. And you know, in England, everyone loves an underdog. So when you play for Watford against Liverpool, Man United, and you beat them, the press love you. So the press loved him when he was the Watford manager. When he went to manage England, the boots on now the underfoot. And Graham's thing was always be open. So he opens himself to the press very naively to say, listen, because we're all English and, you know, we all want to do well, the press included, we're all pulling in the right direction. This is what we are, because he's very Churchillian in his attitude towards British people being all together. And he thought that, you know, if I open myself up to them and I'm very honest with them, they will be on my side. So he was very naive in that, because he was too open. When he should never have agreed to do that Warts and all, the documentary, when, you know, they're on the side of the pitch, and very open with them in terms of everything he actually said, because they crucified him. I think that hurt him more than anything else.
Yeah, because he obviously operated under the assumption that if you're truthful and authentic, you'll be okay. But you're not dealing with a truthful and authentic system. You're dealing with a system that has certain roles, whether each individual within that system is aware of those roles.
Absolutely.
Functions.
And if you can't challenge the system, things will stay the same. You get within the system, because look, Margaret Thatcher was a woman. Nothing changed for women. Cressida Dick, they're now going through the Sarah Everard and having to go Cressida Dick because she's a woman, so she should do better to attack her. She can't change anything within the system. And the biggest example of that, Russell, which you will understand, is the CSL, the ESL, the European Super League. Liverpool, Arsenal, Man United, these big clubs are the strongest, most powerful clubs within UEFA. Now, they know we can't change things for the betterment of ourselves within that existing structure. So we have to leave that. We can't say we're the strongest in UEFA, so therefore we want more, because UEFA, the system controls that, no matter how powerful you are as an individual club. So I think that's an example. That's why I'm saying, from the black perspective, why do we as black people, with 3% black people in the country, feel that if we get more black people into these positions, we can change things? You cannot change anything within an existing system. That's why, obviously, and it's not going to happen, as much as, you know, I know what you're like, and maybe I'm leading towards that total revolution. That ain't going to happen. So I just say, once we get rid of racism, sexism, homophobia, yeah, the majority of black people, women and gay people will still be exactly where they are. But it won't be because they're black, they're women, or they're gay. It'll be other challenges that we have based on the system that we live in. So that is where Graham probably felt within the system he could actually change it by being open and honest.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, with that critique that you, or the different criticism you received when you had the Three Lions on, as opposed to the Mad Moose of Watford, do you think that was you know, yes, it's a step up and it's a different attitude and it's a different level of scrutiny and you're not the underdog? I take that point. Do you feel there was a racial component to that, or do you think it was the same kind of stick that Hoddle used to get as, like, something about, they're luxury players, these good footballers?
Well, it depends on I didn't play as well for England as I did for Watford or for Liverpool, because the football was different anyway. Particularly when I played for Liverpool, it's completely different. So that's understandable. So I completely accept the criticisms that I didn't play as well for England as I did for Liverpool, because the football was different. So that's understandable. That's not an issue. But the one time where race did play a factor, or national identity, was when we played against San Marino, where from the start of the match, the whole stadium were booing me. And we won 5-0, 6-0. I never came off. I wasn't playing worse than anybody else. But what had happened was, in the Sunday before, Jimmy Greaves had done a piece, God rest his soul, and he's a nice man. but he'd done a piece on my commitment to England because I wasn't born in England. And the fact that when I used to have banter with Brian Robson about West Indies cricket teams, because I wanted West Indies to beat England in cricket, that kind of banter, you know, so that kind of thing. So how could I be committed to England? Because, you know, because there was question marks about why I wasn't playing well for England. It's like, because I'm not committed because A, I wasn't born here, and B, you know, when England played the West Indies at cricket and I have banter with Brian Robson. And in fact, yes, I did want West Indies to beat England at cricket. That doesn't mean I'm not committed to the England football team, but then that shows up the whole, how committed am I? And as I've always said, we are committed to whoever we choose or chooses us to be our allies, which means I use Stuart Pearce as an example. You know him, West Ham. Full quintessential Englishman, British Bulldog, wears heart on his sleeves, 69 caps for England. If Stuart Pearce had 68 caps for England and his 69th cap, his first cap, his 69th cap, magically, don't ask me how, it's just a question, had to be for France against England, Stuart would give 100% in that game. 100%, because that is who he is, a man. I have chosen to play for this team now. I've played for England 69 times, but if I've chosen to play for this team, I'm going to give 100% against England, because that's his professionalism. That's who he identifies with at that particular time. So I suppose because of the fact that I wasn't born in England probably led people to believe that.
Yeah, and I suppose that cricket test almost became a late 20th century English political maxim. Like, you know, I remember Norman Tebbit going, the cricket test for like non-white English people. Which
lots of them now.
India or Pakistan or, you know, yeah, that's old school racism. Hey, so like, what do you think then, mate, of like there's a few sort of things in contemporary football which I know you touch on in the book. One, the incorporation of the Black Lives Matter movement, the cynicism initially of some fans towards the taking of the knee, and like incorporating, if you can, not wanting to speak for Les Ferdinand, but what I've picked up from watching Les Ferdinand speak is that he has some skepticism around the taking the knee movement.
Yeah.
What are your feelings about that and that initial reaction from regular fans or whatever?
Well, first of all, the nuances around Black Lives Matter. For me, Black Lives Matter just means Black Lives Mattering. And it's not a question of which Black Lives Matter, but it seems to me, that's why I put about a bit in the book about which Black Lives Matter, because it seems that the Black Lives that matter are the elite Black lives. Because of course, there are 400 girls who were taken from Nigeria not long ago, no one cares about. And you look what goes on, the devastation that's going on in Africa due to colonialism and the legacy of that. So I'm not blaming Black Africa, but I'm saying that it seems as if it's only the Black lives that matter are only the ones who, if you're attacked by a white policeman or you're a football player or an actor or a rap artist who can't get an Emmy, it seems to me that they're the only Black lives that matter. What about the Black lives in the inner cities that no one's talking about? So first of all, it's which Black lives matter. Now, secondly, so just like taking the knee has now, the question about taking the knee, it's not about why we're taking a knee. It's about whether we have the right to take the knee. So we've forgotten why we're taking a knee. So it's about, yes, I think we should. I think we shouldn't. I have the right to. No, you don't. Why are we taking a knee? Just like passing the red card down the line 25 years ago and the Champions League, which is still going on now, nothing has changed, but people are still doing it. So the people who push back, they have been fooled into thinking, because of course, the majority of people who are booing him, let's be honest, if you're a football fan, you're working class. It's not a judgment, good or bad, but it's mainly working class football fans who are now booing, taking the knee, whatever. It's not a judgment on them at all, but that's what it is. They have been fooled that it's about Marxism. And I said a piece about, well, you know, working class people should be Marxists because Marxism is there to protect them. So, and I'm being facetious when I say this and being funny. So please do not take this seriously. But if you want to defund the police, a lot of working class people would be happy with defunding the police because they'll be able to get away with a lot more than if the police were there. However, defunding the police is not about not having security. Defunding the police is about using that money in other areas where it's more necessary. And also, if you got rid of poverty, then there would be less crime, then you need less police. So that is what Marxism is. It's not just about defunding the police and, you know, just having, so it's much more complicated than that. But it's a lot of people who want to push back because they really do not believe that I'm not saying they don't believe Black Lives Matter, but they don't believe there's an issue. They don't believe there's a problem. And it's for white working class people. And I'll tell you why I'm on white working class people's side. Because the whole idea of white privilege is 100% a thing, 100% a thing. But a white working class person who can't get a job, can't get a house, can't feed his family, he doesn't feel the benefit of his white privilege. How can he feel when he say to him, you're privileged because the police isn't going to stop you. And if you're going to a shop, no one's going to follow you. So that's white privilege. I can't afford to go into a shop because I'm getting money. So the police can't stop me in a car, I can't afford a car, I can't afford a house. So they don't feel the benefit of white privilege. Black people see the benefit of white privilege because we're being stopped because of the color of our skin, X, Y, Z. So there, white privilege is a thing, but white working class people don't see it. We see it. So let's explain it to them. Now, how can you explain to a white working class person white privilege by giving them an example of a footballer who gets racially abused, or a banana comes on the field once a week, or he gets abused on Twitter, but he's on £100,000 a week, lives in a big house, drives a big car. He can go to any elite white circles, Downing Street. He can go to the front of the queue in any restaurant and any shop. And you say to the white underprivileged, the white working class man who wants everything that he has, says, see, you're better off than him. How can you empathize with that? How we should explain it is, all the negative aspects of your life that you go through, the black working class go through the exact same thing. Can't get jobs, can't get houses, can't feed their family. Plus, they have the added burden of the negative perception of them because they're black. Maybe you kind of empathize with that. And even if they don't believe that, the added burden of being black, or they may not understand it, if they say, well, if you're going through what I'm going through, can't get a job and houses, I empathize with you. And that is what should happen. But unfortunately, we're using it by showing the wrong examples of white privilege, of, not just, and that's why Marcus Rashford, when he did this underprivileged thing, shows what a powerful a footballer can do, to use his voice to talk about underprivilege rather than pointing the finger at Eastern European fans or some 12-year-old boy at Tottenham who makes a racist comment.
When you make that point of describing how much the economic working class have, regardless of racial, sexual, or gender identity, it's a strong call for solidarity and for a different type of politics and a different type of conversation. And by promoting these ideas, for example, the idea of highlighting privileged people of color and opposing that to the white working class experience, it is useful in keeping the kind of divide and conquer mentality that imperialism has always been dependent on. John, another thing that's surprising, may I say, with your, I have to say, radical, and I mean that as a compliment, your radical political beliefs. They shouldn't be radical. They're normal common sense. They're normal common sense, but they're radical in terms of the way that the world functions, the institutions of media, politics, and corporations. It's also surprising to me that you come from a military background and that you deeply, deeply love and admire your father. My assumption would be that your father, in order to succeed in the army, and I know I've got some great friends that have been in the military and are in the military actually, but I would rather prejudicially perhaps think that someone that's achieved a lot in the military would be down with sort of quite sort of uniform thinking. Talk to us about that.
Well, the reason is because while my father wanted to be in the army, my father was a brilliant person. When he was 14 years old, he was in the top 3 in his country in Trinidad educationally, and not the top 3%, the top 3 people for doing A-levels at 14. They were called hires. He did ancient Greek, he did classics, because he as an individual was enamored with those qualities to achieve despite his circumstance. And his father did that into him. His father, who was a civil servant, his father, when he was brought up his children, my father's sister was the first female judge in Trinidad. This is like 40 years ago, the first female judge, because his father said, we're going to become independent shortly, and my children have to be educated. So my grandfather would not let my father, my aunties, my uncles, who then became professors at university, clean their bedroom, clean their shoes, do any washing up. Him and my father's mother did all of that, and they said, you have to study because this is the future of black people if you really want to get out of it. So, but my father, while he was strong enough, despite the environment, to do what he did, he understood that for the average black person, this is not what it is. So therefore, my father did a lot of work in Jamaica for underprivileged boys who will say, you know what you have to do? Go and cut the grass, go and climb a tree and pick some mango so you can make a living for yourself. Because he understood that not everybody can do what he did, or everybody can do what Nelson Mandela or Obama did. So therefore, because not every white working class person is going to be the brightest. So when you talk about role models, who are our role models as black people? And what are we told? Footballers, actors, rappers, we're the role models. You go to where the power brokers are, who go to Harrow, Eton, Yale, Princeton in America. I don't think you go to Harrow and Eton and they're going to say their role models are Paul Gascoigne and Harry Kane. But we want our black role models to be able to box and fight, because we don't make decisions. So that's one thing. But my father, as much as he understood, so when he went to Sandhurst, he knew he had to volunteer for everything. He was the heavyweight boxing champion of Sandhurst, never boxed. He played rugby for Sandhurst, never played rugby. But he understood as a black man, I'm going to be judged negatively. So therefore, I have to volunteer and be better than everybody else. Now, that from an individual perspective for aspirations is always good to give everyone. However, you can't then use that as an example when a brilliant black person gets there, a brilliant woman gets there and say, see, Everything is equal opportunities because they did it. So although he understood that he could do it, and maybe he told his children that we could do it also, and we have. My sister's got a PhD, my other sister's a lawyer. My cousin Tanya, Chuckham, I don't even know if she's a federal judge. She's from Jamaica. She's a federal judge who put those 5 men in prison for the storming of the Capitol. So she's having a hard time. 2 gastroenterologists. My sons are all, my son's a doctor, daughter's a doctor. So we are educational. But that doesn't mean use us as an example for everybody. What we have to do is provide an environment down below for you to maximize your potential to make. So if all you can achieve is to be a postman, then you be a postman. And that's what my dad's attitude was. We were never elitist. For ourselves, maybe as individuals, because we knew we were given opportunities to be able to do that. But from the majority of people, they can't. So we have to give them an opportunity to maximize their potential to do whatever they can. And it's not Wakanda. Black people are still going to be struggling, but it won't be because they're Black.
Mate, how did you get on in the sort of general ambience of the dressing rooms, Watford, Newcastle, Liverpool, given that you seem to be like a Michel Foucault-style cultural analyst?
Well, I always made them feel uncomfortable. I always had conversations with them. When all the banter started and stuff, I'd say, so why do you think that you're superior to me? Because you're white. No, we don't. And why don't you see me as Black? What is it that when you say you don't see me as Black, what is it that you see? What is the Black you see that I'm not? Because I don't smoke a spliff and have dreadlocks and have my jeans around my ass. Is that what Black is to you? So of course, while it started with a banter, they always avoided me because of course, it could either get into an argument, a discussion, or having a bit of a laugh. But I'd always have this conversation with them when they say, we don't see people as Black. Or we say we people as the same. I say, you see people as the same. If a white person sees a Black person as the same, there's only 2 possibilities of that. You've either brought Black people up to your level to see them as the same, because you see yourself in a particular position. You don't know where that is. So you either bring Black people up to see them as the same, or you bring yourself down to the level as Black people to see them as the same. And we know which one it is. Because when white people say we see Black people as the same, if you see Black people walking down the road in Brixton with dreadlocks, you don't see yourself like them. What you can do is raise him up to your level to then say, oh yeah, I see him as equal. But your initial thought is he's in a reduced state to begin with for you to even make that statement. So this whole idea of also, can Black men make good managers? That is a racist question because it presupposes that there's a possibility that you can't be a good football manager because you're Black. None of your other qualities, because the question is, can Black men make good managers? So it presupposes that you may not be a good manager because you're Black.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of one of the most, from the outside, not being an expert or an experience in the manner you are, that's one of the most obvious.
Well, can I give you a quick example of why intersectionality is important? Because I did an interview with a female sports journalist, and she was asking the same question. Why aren't there many Black managers? And I said, there are only 2 possibilities. The first one is that they are mainly unconsciously discriminated against, because any Black manager gets a job at the club, all the fans want him to do well, without a shadow of a doubt. But when he doesn't do well, that's when the old unconscious perception of whether he could do the job in the first place kicks in. So they all support him. They support him at Celtic, wherever you go. So it's either that there's an unconscious bias towards them, or they're not good enough to do the job because they're Black. And I said to her, which one is it? She goes, maybe there's a third one. I said, what's that? She goes, maybe they don't want to be managers. And I said, oh yeah, that's right. That's right. Just like women don't want to be sports journalists. And then she knew what I was saying. She went, okay, yes, I take your point. Because when it doesn't affect us, we're not interested. That's why intersectionality is the most important dynamic to the solution.
Yes, and most significantly of all, I once spoke to the gay rights activist Peter Tatchell, and he said that, even though there have been incredible achievements in the world of civil rights, like around race and obviously in his case around sexuality, he said that in his personal experience, he'd noticed that whenever you get near economics as an activist, shit gets real. The kickback comes.
But you don't want to disturb the status quo, do you?
Yeah,
so they'll allow certain concessions to certain people and say, you can come into the party, and all the elite are up there in the party looking down on everyone else, and they're all fighting down below because they've all convinced each other that it's the other people down below which is the reason for their discontent.
I think like I can feel from your vocal tone that maybe you've got to wrap up, but I feel like one of the other things you talked about is a sort of a common modern parable around race, the Raheem Sterling story. That when Raheem pulled out that those 2 comparative stories, the reporting on the purchasing of house by young footballers, in the case of the white footballer, well done boy, done good, and then the black footballer, you flash little bastard, like as a brilliant example of the way the unconscious racist biases and the way that they operate. Like Raheem Sterling, I noted for a while made himself kind of untouchable, but I thought like because people like the media are like, oh shit, this kid knows what he's talking about. So like, but like now that Raheem, there's question marks again over Raheem because of, you know, he's not playing at City and stuff like that. I'm starting to see the emergence of the same unconscious tendency in the reporting around Raheem.
If you want an example of why football can do nothing, it's because when Gareth, and I think it was very disrespectful for Gareth to talk about this new diverse England team. I played for England in '83. We had 5 black players on the pitch. In Rio Ferdinand's time, they had 7, 8 black players on the pitch. So why now are we trying to give this illusion that this is a new diverse England team as if black players hadn't played before? So I think that is quite disrespectful. But of course, we're trying to give that illusion that this is something new. And of course, in the Euros, it was all, look what they've done. The whole nation comes together. After they missed a penalty, I'm on a WhatsApp group with lots of my black friends. As soon as they missed a penalty, the WhatsApp group said, they're going to get it. So what we're actually saying is that we will believe, trust, and support the black players as long as they do well. But if they do badly, you see what happens. And that is not a solution. So the solution isn't saying we use these black footballers as examples, because what you're saying to them is that you better keep doing well, because as soon as you're not doing well, things are going to change. That is no solution to the problem.
Yeah, conditional non-racism is racism. I feel like really, John, what we're getting near to is you cannot change these superficial aspects of racism, i.e. the cartoonish racism of Eastern Bloc or, you know, shouting, mad, lunatic racists, without making fundamental economic and political changes to the entire system. And because of that, only symbolic change will be offered, because the alternative will affect the interests of the powerful.
Absolutely, but we have to start with ourselves to, first of all, own it within ourselves that we are racially biased to a certain degree, sexist, homophobic, and not just wait for the ones who get caught, point the finger at them and say everything's okay as long as we get rid of them. Because that's what we do. We're now teaching people how not to get caught by the language they use. And so we're teaching people how not to get caught. And as long as you don't get caught, things can stay the same. That's why we have to change people's perceptions. So a lot of black people say the narrative should be, I don't care how you see me, I care how you treat me. It should be the other way around. Because that is only short term. Once you say, I don't care, you see me, I care, you treat me, we can force people to treat us equally, but then they will find ways not to treat you unequally, and it's not going to be illegal. So, for example, you're not allowed to go at football matches anymore, make monkey noises. But if a player comes to take a throw in and someone does that to him, and he calls the police, he's going to go, my armpit scratching me, Mr. Officer. Is that illegal? We'll make armpit scratching illegal. Okay, we'll boo. Booing is not illegal. The whole stadium can boo a black player. We know what he's doing, but it's not illegal. Make booing illegal. Okay, we'll clap. There's always going to be ways. Whereas if we say, I don't care how you treat me, I care how you see me, at first we'll be treated unequally. But the more we then start to see people as equal, we'll think, well, there's no need for us to treat them unequal, and there's no laws necessary put in place for us to treat them unequal, because we see them as equal. Because, of course, after the American Civil War, black people got the vote. Black people were senators because, of course, that's more to do with politically, wanted to give the South a slap on the hand and get more power by black votes. Then as time went by, where they knew that white people had to come back together, then the Jim Crow laws came in, because they disenfranchised black people after that, because they never ever saw them as equal. You have to see people as equal before you treat them as equal.
That's a very beautiful and interesting perspective. John, from talking to you, what I get is, like, you know, as a person that enjoyed watching you as a player, that what you brought to the game, like as a fan, it seemed like ahead of its time, and like there was a sort of a complexity and nuance to the way that you used the ball, the way that you moved, the way that you passed, the way that you scored goals. And it's difficult now not to imagine that that's an expression of some kind of essence that is now finding its expression. And of course, I don't know what you were like as a person then, now finding its expression through your communication, through your opinions. That it's the same essence, it seems, that found its expression as a player, can now through your oratory.
I was the same person back then. There are two aspects to everybody. There's who you are and what you are. What I was John Barnes, a footballer. If you're a Man United fan, I was crap. If you're the Liverpool fan, I was good. Regardless, I am who I am, the footballer. But who I am was never what I was. I never thought about the adulation that I got and how special I am. I thought exactly the same way as I think now. I was the exact same person as I was now. And now that I've finished playing football, I can continue to be who I am. But unfortunately, it would have been great had I still been a footballer now. That's what I'm saying. Imagine if footballers now were to talk about real problems within their own communities with the power they actually have to make a difference, like Marcus Rashford, instead of being allowed just to point the finger at Eastern Europeans or racist football fans in this country. What could be done? He changed government policy towards school dinners in 1 week.
Amazing. Amazing. It's amazing. I imagine that you'll have good relationships with players that are playing still and a mentor in some would be my guess. And that's I hope that's true anyway. John, it's amazing talking to you. Can we put in I'd love to get a chance for us to chat for an hour and a half, couple of hours.
Absolutely. Someone's already been in touch with me about that. So we're just going to try and get a date in because I'd love to come on. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, good luck with the rest of your day up there. And it's
Thanks very much.
Joy and a real privilege. Thanks, John.
Okay, mate. All the best.
Cheers, man. Take it easy.